Isabella Rivera strode into Horizon Airlines headquarters at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport under the blazing March sun. Her pilot's uniform crisp and her 4 gold stripes glinting on each sleeve. At 34, she carried the quiet pride of a Latina woman who'd climbed from the gritty streets of East Los Angeles to the cockpit of one of America's most storied airlines. This was her first day as a captain at Horizon. A milestone after more than 12,000 flight hours logged across military cargo planes and regional jets. She pulled her flight case behind her, the wheels clicking rhythmically against the polished terminal floor. Her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun that matched the precision of her every move. Today wasn't just a job, it was a victory lap for a girl who'd once watched planes soar over her neighborhood and dreamed of touching the clouds. She flew like the sky was her birthright. That's what her Air Force buddies used to say. With 15 years of experience, from hauling supplies over Iraq in AC-17 to navigating blizzards as a commercial pilot out of San Diego, Isabella was ready to take the controls at Horizon Airlines. She glanced at her watch, 6:45 a.m. The briefing for Flight HA-112 to Denver was set for 7 o'clock. Giving her just enough time to grab a coffee from the crew lounge and review the flight path she'd memorized over the past week. Rockies turbulence was on the forecast, but nothing she hadn't handled 100 times before. The crew lounge door swung open, releasing a wave of fresh coffee aroma and the low hum of morning chatter. Inside, pilots and flight attendants clustered around tables, flipping through charts or scrolling on phones. Isabella stepped in, her flight case trailing behind, and the room shifted subtly. Conversations paused. Heads turned, then quickly looked away. She offered a small smile, nodding in greeting, but got nothing back. She was used to this. Less than 2% of U.S. commercial pilots were Latina women. Per the latest stats, she was a rarity, a unicorn, and she'd learned to carry that label with grace. Today, she hoped it'd fade into the background. "You must be Captain Rivera?" The voice was deep, clipped, and came from behind her. Isabella turned to face a man in his 50s, salt and pepper hair. Sharp blue eyes behind steel-rimmed glasses. And 4 gold stripes matching hers. His badge read, "Ethan Crowley, Check Captain." She smiled, extending her hand. "Yes, I'm Isabella. Great to meet you, Captain Crowley. I've gone over the Denver route. Looks like some crosswinds over the Rockies. But nothing too wild." Ethan shook her hand, but his grip was limp, perfunctory, and his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Welcome to Horizon Airlines," he said, his tone flat, rehearsed. "But there's a slight change. We need you to wait in the East lobby while I double-check some details on your paperwork." Isabella's heart skipped a beat. "Wait in the lobby?" she echoed, keeping her voice steady. "I cleared every hiring step. FAA background check. Flight certs. Everything. I was confirmed to start today." Ethan shrugged, like it was no big deal. Just a final formality. Horizon's strict about new captains, especially on routes like Denver. "You get it, right? The East lobby's nice, comfy seats. Free coffee." He turned and walked into the briefing room, the glass door sliding shut behind him, leaving Isabella standing there, her hand still tight on her flight case. She froze for a moment, her breathing heavier than it should have been. In her career, she'd faced this kind of thing before: subtle brush-offs, sidelong glances, the unspoken hurdles no one dared name. But this hit different. At Horizon Airlines, on her first damn day, it felt like a slap with intent. She took a deep breath, wheeled her case toward the East lobby as instructed, but her mind was already racing. The East lobby was a sleek space, beige leather armchairs, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the tarmac where Horizon's Boeing 737s were being fueled up. To Isabella, it might as well have been a holding pen. She sat down, popped open her flight case, and pulled out her Horizon confirmation email. It was all there: signed contract, start date today, no mention of extra checks. What the hell was going on? She flipped to the HA-112 flight plan, a bread and butter route, but tricky with Denver's mountainous approach. She'd flown it dozens of times at her old gig, even landed in a whiteout once when an engine started coughing mid-flight. Her phone buzzed, a text from her mom. "Rosa. Mija, how's the first day? I lit a candle for you at church this morning. So proud." Isabella smiled, her fingers pausing on the papers. "Rosa, Who'd stitched factory uniforms 14 hours a day to keep them fed? Was her rock. She typed back, "Thanks, Mama. All good so far, tell you tonight." She didn't want to worry her. Not yet. 30 minutes dragged by. No one came for her. Isabella stood, marched to the lobby desk near the tarmac view. "Excuse me," she said to the young guy tapping at his computer. "I'm Isabella Rivera, new captain. I was told to wait here. But I haven't heard squat. Did Captain Crowley say anything?" He glanced at her, sympathy flickering in his eyes. Then checked his screen. Nothing noted. "Captain Rivera, want me to call the briefing room?" She nodded, unease gnawing at her gut. He dialed, murmured into the phone, then looked up. "Crowley says to keep waiting. They're tied up." Isabella returned to her seat. But she wasn't about to twiddle her thumbs. She fired up her laptop, connected to Horizon's Wi-Fi, and started digging on Ethan Crowley. It didn't take long. Old Aviation forum posts popped up. Ethan had trashed diversity hiring at a 2020 industry conference, calling it a safety trade-off. A buried comment from an ex-Horizon pilot claimed he'd iced out anyone who didn't fit the company's old-school vibe code for women and minorities. She snapped the laptop shut, her jaw tight. This wasn't random. Ethan Crowley didn't want her here, and he was flexing his rank to shove her aside from the jump. But Isabella didn't back down easy. She'd grown up in streets where you scrapped for every inch, and she'd turned others' doubts into jet fuel to climb higher. She rose, yanked her flight case toward the briefing room. If they wouldn't call her in, she'd walk in herself. But as she neared the glass door, Ethan emerged, his face hard as granite. "Captain Rivera," he snapped, "I told you to wait in the lobby. We'll get you when we're ready. Go back now." Isabella met his stare, unflinching. "I'm not here to wait. Captain Crowley, I'm here to fly. If there's an issue with my certs, show me the proof. Otherwise, I expect to join the briefing like any other captain." Ethan smirked, a dry, brittle sound like wind over a Texas plain. "This is Horizon Airlines. Rivera, we do things our way. Don't like it? Exits that way." He jerked a thumb toward the emergency door, then spun back inside, the glass slamming shut. Isabella stood there, her grip on the flight case whitening her knuckles. Her mom's words echoed, "You gotta be twice as good to get half as far." "Mija." She took a long breath, turned back to the lobby. But not to sit idly. If Horizon wouldn't open the door, she'd find a way to kick it down, from inside the sky she'd claimed as her own. Isabella Rivera sat back in the east lobby of Horizon Airlines' Dallas headquarters. Her flight case parked beside her like a loyal co-pilot. The hum of jet engines outside the window was a comforting drone. But it couldn't drown out the fire sparking in her chest. Ethan Crowley's words, "Wait in the lobby," looped in her head, each replay stoking her resolve. She wasn't a rookie fresh out of flight school. She'd flown through sandstorms in the Middle East and landed on icy runways with one engine sputtering. Yet here she was, sidelined on day one, treated like her wings were borrowed, not earned. She unzipped her flight case, pulled out her Horizon ID badge, still crisp with her name in bold, and stared at it. This wasn't just personal. Something was off, and she'd be damned if she let it slide. The clock hit 7:30 a.m. The HA 112 briefing would be wrapping up, and she was still stuck here, a captain without a cockpit. She stood, smoothed her uniform, and headed back to the crew lounge, figuring she'd catch someone on their way out. The lounge was quieter now. Most of the crew dispersed to gates or break rooms. A young Asian American guy in a first officer's uniform, 2 stripes on his sleeves, lingered by the coffee station, pouring cream into a paper cup. His badge read, Diego Martinez. Isabella recognized him from the hiring roster. He'd started at Horizon 2 years back. "Hey," she said, keeping her tone casual. "You in the Denver briefing?" Diego glanced up, nodded. "Yeah, HA 112. You're Captain Rivera, right? Heard you were taking it today." "Supposed to," she said, leaning against the counter. "Crowley pulled me last minute. Said something about paperwork." Diego's brow furrowed, just for a second, then smoothed out. "That's weird. I've seen new captains start without hiccups. Crowley's running it now. He's got me as his FO." He hesitated, stirring his coffee a beat too long. "No offense, but it's bullshit you're not in there." Isabella smirked, appreciating the honesty. "None taken. You've flown with him much?" "Enough," Diego said, lowering his voice. "He's old school. Likes things his way, his crew. His rules. Doesn't vibe with change, if you catch my drift. He glanced at her stripes. Then away, like he'd said too much. She caught the drift all right. Old school could mean a lot of things. But paired with Ethan's attitude, it smelled like bias with a side of control freak. Thanks, Diego. Good luck up there. He nodded, grabbed his flight bag, and headed out. Isabella poured herself a coffee, black, no frills, and sat at a corner table. Her mind ticking. She'd dealt with old school types before. Guys who flinched when a woman or a minority walked into the cockpit. Muttering about standards while ignoring her flawless record. But this felt bigger, more deliberate. Horizon wasn't some backwater outfit. It was a legacy airline with a shiny reputation. So why the red carpet roll up? Her phone buzzed again. Another text from her mom. Call me when you're free. Mija, want to hear all about it. Isabella smiled, but didn't reply yet. She needed answers first. She opened her laptop, pulled up Horizon's internal crew portal, and skimmed the HA 112 roster. Ethan Crowley, Captain. Diego Martinez, First Officer. Standard crew. No surprises. But then she noticed something. A last-minute swap. The original roster, emailed to her 3 days ago, had her name as Captain. Now it was buried in an audit pending footnote. She frowned, cross-checked her hiring docs. Everything was clean. FAA certs, medicals, the works. Ethan's paperwork excuse was thinner than a paper wing. She sipped her coffee, the bitterness mirroring her mood, and decided to poke around. She headed to the maintenance hangar, a cavernous space buzzing with techs in coveralls wrenching on a 737's landing gear. The air smelled of jet fuel and grease, home turf for her. She'd always made a point to know the ground crews. They were the unsung heroes keeping planes aloft. A middle-aged black woman with a clipboard caught her eye. Badge said, Priya Patel. Lead mechanic. Morning, Isabella called, stepping over a toolbox. Captain Rivera. New here. Just getting the lay of the land. Priya looked up, gave her a quick once-over. Then a nod. Welcome aboard. You're the one they pulled from 112. Huh? Word traveled fast. Yeah, Isabella said, keeping it light. First day hazing, I guess. How's this bird looking? She jerked her head at the 737. Priya hesitated, then shrugged. Good enough to fly. We're on a tight turnaround, management's been pushing lately. More flights, less downtime. Her tone was neutral, but her eyes flicked toward a supervisor hovering nearby. Clipboard in hand. Tight turnarounds ever skip anything? Isabella asked, casual but sharp. Priya's lips tightened. Not supposed to. FAA's got rules. But, she trailed off, glancing at the supervisor again. Let's just say some checks get streamlined when the brass leans on us. Isabella's gut tightened. Streamlined? That was pilot speak for cutting corners, a cardinal sin in aviation. She didn't push Priya further, not here. Not yet, but filed it away. Thanks, Priya. Keep these birds safe. Always, Priya said, a flicker of something. Worry? Crossing her face before she turned back to her work. Back in the lounge, Isabella's coffee had gone cold, but her suspicions were heating up. She pulled up Horizon's public safety record, solid, with a few minor dings over the years. But then she dug into pilot forums. The unfiltered underbelly of the industry. Posts about Horizon popped up. Crowley's a gatekeeper, good luck if you're not his type. Management's obsessed with on-time stats, maintenance takes the hit. One ex-employee claimed a tech got canned for flagging a faulty fuel pump that passed inspection anyway. No proof, just whispers, but they lined up with Priya's cagey vibe. By noon, she was assigned to Shadow Flight HA 305, a short hop to Houston with Captain Tom Grayson, a grizzled vet with a buzzkit and a permanent scowl. He barely acknowledged her, barking orders at the first officer, a nervous kid named Jake who kept shooting her apologetic looks. Isabella rode the jump seat, watching Grayson run the pre-flight like a drill sergeant. He was thorough, she'd give him that, but when they taxied out, he finally spoke to her. Don't know where you came from, Rivera, he growled, eyes on the runway, but Horizon's got traditions. We don't cut corners, and we don't babysit newbies. Never asked for a babysitter. She said, cool as ice. I've got 12.000 hours and 3 tours. I know the book. He grunted, unimpressed. Book's one thing. Horizon's another. Prove you belong. The challenge hung there, heavy as the Texas heat. The flight was smooth, but on the descent, Isabella caught something. A faint vibration in the left engine. Subtle enough most wouldn't notice. She checked the instruments. Nothing flagged. Grayson didn't blink, but she'd felt that buzz before, an early warning of a bearing issue on a C-17 years back. She waited till they landed, then spoke up. "Captain, that vibration might be worth a maintenance check." Grayson turned, his stare hard. "Engines are fine. Ground crew cleared it. You saying they're wrong?" "Just saying I felt it," she replied. "Steady. Better safe than sorry." He scoffed. "You're green here, Rivera. Don't stir shit up day one." Jake shifted uncomfortably but stayed silent. Back at DFW, Isabella filed a quiet note with maintenance anyway, requesting a look at the engine logs. The tech on duty, a wiry guy with a southern drawl, shrugged it off. "Cleared this morning. No issues." But his eyes darted to a stack of rushed paperwork. And Isabella's radar pinged again. That night, in her rented Dallas apartment, she poured a glass of tequila and called her brother. "Luis, a mechanic back in LA. Ever hear of Horizon fudging logs?" she asked. Cutting to the chase, Luis whistled low. "Rumors. Yeah, big airlines push turnaround hard. Sometimes stuff gets overlooked. You seen it?" "Maybe," she said, staring at her notes. Priya's hint. The forum posts. "That damn vibration. Feels like they're testing me." 2. "Crowley's got a hard-on for keeping me out." "Asshole," Luis muttered. "Watch your six. Bella, Aviation don't forgive screw-ups, or whistleblowers." She hung up, the tequila burning her throat. Ethan's smirk flashed in her mind. Grayson's dismissal echoing beside it. This wasn't just hazing. Horizon was hiding something. Maybe in the logs. Maybe in the culture, and her being sidelined wasn't a coincidence. She'd spent her life proving she belonged in the sky. Now, she'd prove she could bring it down if she had to. Isabella Rivera leaned against the kitchen counter of her sparse Dallas apartment, the glow of her laptop casting sharp shadows across the room. It was past midnight, the tequila glass long empty. But sleep was a distant dream. Her first week at Horizon Airlines had been a gauntlet. Ethan Crowley's cold shoulder on day one had morphed into a relentless hazing campaign. She'd shadowed 3 flights since, all with captains who treated her like a student pilot despite her 12.000 hours. Grayson's gruff dismissal. A guy named Hargrove who muttered about quotas, and a third who barely spoke beyond checklist calls. Each trip, she'd caught whiffs of something rotten, vague log entries, rushed pre-flight checks, a tense edge to the ground crews. Tonight, she was done wondering. She was digging. Her screen displayed Horizon's internal maintenance portal, accessed with her still active captain's credentials. She'd started cross-referencing flight logs from HA 305, the Houston hop where she'd felt that engine vibration. The official report said, "all clear." But the timestamps didn't add up. The last full engine inspection was dated 2 weeks prior. Yet the plane had flown 18 segments since, well past the FAA's recommended 50-hour check cycle. She frowned, scribbling notes on a legal pad. Bearing where? Fuel line? Something's off. Then she pulled the roster history. Ethan's name popped up on half those flights. Grayson on a few others. A pattern, maybe. Her phone buzzed, jolting her. A text from Diego Martinez, the first officer from day one. "Hey, Captain, you free tomorrow? Got something to run by you." She typed back, "Yeah. Post-flight, crew lounge, 3 p.m. His reply was instant. "Cool, see you." Diego's candor in the lounge had stuck with her. He'd called bullshit on her sidelining. And that took guts at a place like Horizon. Maybe he'd seen more than he let on. The next afternoon, after shadowing a bumpy Tulsa run with Hargrove, who'd sneered when she flagged a sluggish hydraulic gauge, Isabella met Diego in the lounge. He looked jumpy, his usual easy grin replaced by tight lips. They grabbed a table in the corner, away from the handful of crew-swapping war stories over coffee. "What's up?" she asked. Cutting to it, Diego leaned in, voice low. "You've been poking around, right? Maintenance stuff?" She raised an eyebrow. "Maybe. You hearing things?" He nodded, glancing at the door. "Caught a convo yesterday. Tech's in the hangar. They're pissed. Management's been leaning on them to sign off planes faster. One guy said they skipped a wing stress test on a 737 last month cause dispatch needed it for a red-eye. Flew anyway. Isabella's stomach dropped. Wing stress tests weren't optional. Cracks in a fuselage could turn a routine flight into a fireball. They document it? Barely. Diego said. Log said, visual inspection complete. No details. Tech wouldn't sign, so a supervisor did. Happens more than you'd think. Who's pushing it? She pressed. Word is it's from the top, exec ops. Maybe Crowley's crew. On-time stats are king here. Safety's just flexible. He air-quoted the last word. Disgust in his eyes. Jesus, she muttered. You got names? Not yet, he said, but I can dig. You're not wrong to push. Captain, this place, it's not what it looks like. Thanks, Diego, she said, meeting his gaze. Keep it quiet, but keep me posted. He nodded, grabbed his bag, and slipped out. Isabella stayed, her coffee cooling as her mind raced. Flexible safety at 30,000 feet? That wasn't an airline, it was a death trap waiting to happen. She'd seen combat zones with better oversight. Later that day, she swung by the maintenance hangar again. This time with purpose. Priya Patel was there, hunched over a 737's engine cowling, her clipboard stacked with papers. Isabella approached, keeping it casual. Hey, Priya, busy day? Always, Priya said, not looking up. These birds don't fix themselves. Bet they'd tell some stories if they could. Isabella replied, nodding at the plane. Heard anything weird lately? Logs not matching up? Priya paused, her wrench stilling. She glanced around, no supervisors this time, then met Isabella's eyes. You're not here to chat about oil changes, are you? Not exactly, Isabella admitted. Felt a vibration on 305 few days back. Logs said clean, but I'm not buying it. Priya sighed, setting the wrench down. You're not wrong to question. They've got us on a leash, turned planes around in half the time. Skip what we can justify. That 305? Fuel pump's been glitchy for weeks. I flagged it, but they overruled me, said it's within tolerance. Tolerance my ass, Isabella said, voice low. That's a lawsuit, or worse, waiting to happen. Tell me about it, Priya said, but you try saying no when execs breathe down your neck. Last guy who pushed back. Transferred to night shift in Boise. Career killer. Who's they? Isabella asked. Ops brass, Crowley's tight with him. Guy named Barrett runs the show, exec ops director. Old boys club. Priya's tone was bitter. Resigned. Isabella nodded, filing it away. Thanks, Priya. You're solid. Just don't quote me, Priya said, picking up her wrench. Got a kid in college. Can't afford to lose this gig. Understood, Isabella said, heading out. Her blood was simmering now. Crowley. Barrett. A whole damn system gaming the rules. She needed more than whispers. That night, she called Luis again, pacing her apartment. Fuel pumps. Wing tests. Horizons playing fast and loose. You ever see logs faked? Shit. Yeah, Luis said through the line. Big carriers do it, backdate stuff. Fudge hours. FAA catches it. It's fines or groundings. You got proof? Working on it, she said. Techs are scared, but they're talking. Something's gonna break. Be careful. Bella, he warned. You're poking a bear with a jet engine. She hung up, then emailed an old Air Force buddy. Sam Torres, now an FAA auditor in Houston. Hey, Sam. Hypothetical. How do you sniff out cooked maintenance books at a big airline? His reply came fast. Look for gaps, missing sign-offs. Repeat, deferrals. Call me if it's real. Over the next week, Isabella turned shadow shifts into recon missions. She photographed log pages when captains weren't looking. Noted discrepancies, hydraulic leaks, fixed, overnight. Inspections dated before flights even landed. She built a quiet network. Diego fed her hangar gossip. Priya slipped her a USB of backlogged maintenance tickets. And a flight attendant, Carla Ruiz, texted her pics of a cracked cabin seal cleared for flight, per ops. Each piece was a crack in Horizon's fuselage. And Isabella was prying them wider. Friday night, she captained her first Horizon flight, a red-eye to Phoenix with Diego as foe. Pre-flight, she triple-checked the logs herself. Spotting a sloppy fuel line entry. She called maintenance. Demanded a full sweep, delaying takeoff 30 minutes. A sin in Horizon's on-time cult. The tech grumbled but found a hairline crack in the pump housing. Good catch, Diego said as they taxied out. Phoenix's lights shimmering ahead. Too good, she replied, gripping the yoke. They're hiding more than this. Back at DFW. She got hauled into ops, Thomas Barrett. A tall suit with a perpetual scowl. Waiting in his office. Captain Rivera, he said, not offering a seat. Your delay cost us thousands. Explain. Cracked fuel pump, she said, standing tall. FAA regs say it's my call. You want planes falling out of the sky? Barrett's eyes narrowed. Our techs cleared it. You don't trust them? I trust my eyes. She shot back. Logs were off. Check the photos. His face reddened. Horizon runs on efficiency. If you can't handle that, maybe this ain't your fit. Safety's my fit, she said, unflinching. Put that in writing if you're telling me to ignore it. He didn't. Watch yourself. Rivera. He growled instead. She walked out, heart pounding but head high. This was war now, and she had ammunition. Isabella Rivera stood in the dim light of her Dallas apartment, surrounded by a mosaic of evidence spread across her coffee table, printouts of maintenance logs with mismatched dates. Priya's USB of deferred repairs. Carla's photos of a cracked cabin seal. And Diego's handwritten notes on hangar whispers. It was 2 a.m. 3 weeks into her war with Horizon Airlines, and the puzzle pieces had snapped into place. This wasn't just sloppy bookkeeping or a few bad apples, it was systemic. Horizon was flying planes with known defects, faking records to dodge FAA scrutiny, and silencing anyone who dared call it out. Her red-eye delay had pissed off Thomas Barrett, but his threat, watch yourself, had lit a fuse. She wasn't watching anymore, she was striking. She poured a shot of tequila, the burn grounding her as she dialed her brother. Luis, it's bad, she said when he picked up. Voice groggy. Fuel pumps, wing stress, hydraulics, they're cutting corners everywhere. I've got proof. Luis swore under his breath. Enough to sink him? Enough to crash him, she said, tapping a photo of a fuel line crack she'd forced maintenance to fix. But I need to move fast. They're onto me. FAA? He asked. Tomorrow, she said. Got a guy, but I'm hitting the press too. This can't wait. Be smart. Bella, he warned. They'll bury you if they can. She hung up, staring at the evidence. Bury her? They'd have to catch her first. She emailed Sam Torres, her FAA contact. Not hypothetical anymore. Major violations at Horizon, logs, defects, retaliation. Can we meet ASAP? Then she CC'd a reporter she'd tracked down at the Dallas Morning News. Alex Harper, who'd broken airline scandals before. Got a story that'll ground Horizon. Call me. Seeds planted. She crashed for a few hours, waking at dawn with a fighter's edge. Saturday morning, she reported for HA 419, a Dallas to Seattle run. Her second captain gig. Diego was her foe again, no coincidence. She figured, they wanted eyes on her. Pre-flight, she scoured the logs, spotting a hydraulic entry dated yesterday for a system that had been serviced in 6 hours, impossible for a full overhaul. She flagged it, demanded a tech verify, delaying takeoff 25 minutes. The supervisor, a wiry guy named Jenkins, stormed over, red-faced. Cleared it myself. Rivera, you're holding up the show. Show me the pressure test. She shot back, arms crossed. He stammered, then waved a vague hand. It's in the system. Not good enough, she said. FAA says full docs. Or it doesn't fly. Jenkins relented, grumbling, and the tech found a leaking valve, fixed on the spot. Diego gave her a nod as they rolled out. Seattle skyline hours away. They hate you for this, he said, half smiling. Good, she replied, easing the throttle. Hate's a great motivator. Back at DFW. The hammer dropped. Ethan Crowley intercepted her at the gate, his face a mask of barely contained fury. Briefing room. Now, he barked, leading her to a glass-walled space where Thomas Barrett in 2 suits, legal. She guessed, waited. No chairs offered, no pleasantries. Captain Rivera. Barrett started, his voice like gravel. You're off HA 419. Crowley's taking it tomorrow. You're on desk duty, admin review. Hand over your badge. Her pulse spiked, but she kept cool. On what grounds? Disrupting operations. Ethan cut in, smirking. 2 delays in a week. You're not Horizon material. I delayed to fix defects you ignored. she said, locking eyes with Barrett. Logs are a mess, hydraulics, fuel lines, wings. You want to talk disruption? Try a crash. Barrett's scowl deepened. You've been snooping, accessing restricted files, harassing staff. That's a breach of contract. Safety's my job, she countered. You're breaching FAA regs. I've got proof. The suits swapped glances, one whispering to Barrett. Ethan slammed a fist on the table. This is blackmail. No, Isabella said, voice steel. This is accountability. She pulled a folder from her flight case, copies of her evidence, and slid it across. At 8 a.m., my lawyer sent this to the FAA. Falsified logs. Defective planes. Pressure on techs. At 10, the Dallas Morning News got the same. Plus retaliation stories, mine. Priya's. Others. You've got a third copy in escrow. Goes public if anything happens to me or my sources. The room went dead silent. Barrett's face drained to ash. Ethan's smirk vanished, and the lawyers scrambled into a huddle. You're bluffing, Barrett rasped. Test me, she said, stepping closer. Ground every shaky plane now. Full independent audit. No retaliation for whistleblowers. That's my deal, non-negotiable. You'll tank us, Ethan roared. Bankruptcy. Versus what? She fired back. FAA yanking your certificate? Families suing when a wing snaps mid-flight? Pick your poison. Barrett stared, defeated, as a lawyer whispered frantically. After a tense minute, he growled, we need time. 1 hour. She cut in. Then I green-light the FAA and press. Clock's ticking. She turned, walked out, and didn't look back, her boots echoing on the tile. Outside, Carla Ruiz caught her in the hall. Eyes wide. They're screwing you, aren't they? Trying, Isabella said, pausing. You still got those SEAL pics? Carla nodded, shaky but firm. Yeah, and more. Oxygen masks on 322 last week. Frayed straps. Cleared anyway. I've been documenting. She pulled out her phone. Showed grainy shots. I'm in if you're taking him down. You could lose everything, Isabella warned. Carla squared her shoulders. Rather lose my job than my conscience. Send it here, Isabella said, handing her a burner email. You're a badass, Carla. At 3 p.m. Her phone rang. Sam Torres. Bella, this is nuclear. FAA's rolling inspectors to DFW tomorrow. You sure? Dead sure, she said, watching planes taxi through the window. They're done. Next call was Alex Harper. Captain Rivera? Got your docs, holy shit. We're running it tonight unless you say stop. Go, she said, pulse steady, full throttle. By 4 p.m., she was back on admin duty, busy work in a bland HR cube. Her badge swapped for a temp pass. But her real work was done. Diego texted. Hangars buzzing. Tex saw Barrett storm out. You're a legend. Priya emailed. Heard rumors. Fuel pump logs just updated, too late. Huh? Even Jake, the timid foe, messaged. Not all of us buy their crap. You're why I signed up. At 5 p.m., Barrett summoned her to the exec boardroom. Ethan, Grayson, and the suits flanked him. Faces grim. You win, Barrett said, voice hoarse. 40% of the fleet's grounding tonight. Audit starts Monday. No blowback on your helpers. Happy? Not happy, she said, standing tall. Just right. Sky doesn't forgive lies. Ethan glared, but said nothing. She walked out, the folder still in their hands, knowing she'd just lit the match. That night, the Dallas Morning News dropped the bomb. Horizon Airlines caught in safety scandal. Whistleblower pilot exposes deadly risks. TV crews swarmed DFW by dawn. Passengers stranded as planes sat idle. Isabella watched from her couch, tequila in hand, as Horizon stock tanked and the FAA swooped in. She'd broken the system wide open, and there was no going back. Isabella Rivera sat on a worn bench outside Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. The late March sun dipping low, painting the tarmac gold. 6 weeks had passed since she dropped the hammer on Horizon Airlines, and the fallout was still rippling. The Dallas Morning News exposé had sparked a firestorm. TV networks picked it up. Passengers demanded refunds, and the FAA grounded 40% of Horizon's fleet overnight. By week 2, the airline's stock had cratered. Executives were on leave, and bankruptcy whispers turned into headlines. Today, she watched workers peel Horizon's swooping eagle logo off a hangar wall. the faded outline a ghost of what once was. She sipped a cold Coke. The fizz a small comfort after a hell of a ride. Her phone buzzed. Luis. You see the news, Bella? Feds just charged Barrett and Crowley, fraud. Endangerment. The works. They're cooked. She smiled. A quiet victory. Saw it. Took long enough. You're a badass, he said, pride thick in his voice. Mama's got the whole block praying for you. Tell her thanks, Isabella said, eyes on a departing jet. Someone else's now. I'll call her tonight. Horizon's collapse hadn't been clean. The FAA's audit uncovered a laundry list. Falsified logs on 50-plus planes. Wing cracks ignored. Fuel systems patched with spit and prayers. Priya's USB, Carla's pics, and Isabella's notes had been the roadmap. Every discrepancy she'd flagged checked out. Former employees crawled out of the woodwork. 2. Techs fired for flagging issues. A pilot who'd quit after a near miss with a faulty landing gear. The Justice Department had enough to bury the execs. And Barrett, Crowley, and Grayson faced years behind bars. Horizon filed Chapter 11 last week. Its assets scooped up by Lone Star Airways. A younger outfit promising a clean slate. Diego slid onto the bench beside her. A grin breaking through his exhaustion. Lone Star's hiring, he said, tossing her a bottle of water. Offered me senior foe. You? Captain Track, she said, catching the bottle. Plus a few others, Delta. Southwest. Even a safety consultant gig with the NTSB. Thinking it over. You changed the game, he said, serious now. Not just here. Airlines everywhere are scrambling. Audits. Whistleblower hotlines. You scared him straight. She shook her head. We did. You, Priya, Carla, everyone who stuck their necks out. Took a village to burn that house down. He laughed, clinking his water against her Coke. To the village. Then, the cost hadn't been light. Nights of doubt, wondering if she'd tanked her career. Calls from anonymous numbers. Threats she'd ignored but logged. The stress etched lines under her eyes. But she'd trade it all again. Every safe landing since was proof. Passengers who'd never know how close they'd skimmed disaster. Crews sleeping easier because someone finally said enough. Her phone rang. Rosa. Mija, you on TV again. Channel 5's calling you, the pilot who saved aviation. I cried. Bella, so proud. Isabella's throat tightened. Thanks, Mama. Couldn't have done it without you. God watched over you. Rosa said. Come home soon. I'm making tamales. Deal, Isabella said, smiling as she hung up. Rosa's faith had carried her through East LA's roughest days. Now it felt like a tailwind lifting her higher. 2 months later, she was back in the cockpit. Lone Star Airways Flight LS-207. Dallas to San Francisco. A Boeing 787 Dreamliner humming under her hands. Her foe, a sharp young black woman named Keisha Jones, monitored the panel with a rookie's focus. Nice day to fly, Isabella said as they leveled off at 35,000 feet. The Pacific shimmering below scattered clouds. Perfect, Keisha agreed, then paused. Captain, what you did at Horizon, it's why I'm here. Gave up nursing school for this. 'Cause you showed the skies for us too. Isabella glanced at her, seeing her younger self in Keisha's determined eyes. It always was, she said. Don't let anyone tell you different. They flew on, the horizon endless, and Isabella felt a weight lift, not gone, but lighter. Horizon's end wasn't her end, it was her beginning. Lone Star had hired Priya as a maintenance chief, Carla as a safety trainer, and dozens of Horizon's rank and file got fresh starts. The industry shifted too. Blind hiring pilots based on hours, not names, anonymous reporting lines, safety councils with real teeth. Slow, messy progress, but progress nonetheless. That evening, in Lone Star's Ops Center, she spotted a new plaque on the wall, her words from the FAA hearing. The sky doesn't care who's flying, it just demands the truth. She'd testified in D.C., voice steady despite the suits staring her down. Laying out Horizon's sins. Now those words hung here. A quiet testament. She touched the frame, remembering her dad, gone 5 years now, telling her at 16. You're tougher than the planes. Mija, fly him straight. She had. Her phone pinged. Luis again. Dinner tomorrow? Big news. She grinned, texting back. Your place. I'll bring beer. Outside. She watched ground crews swarm a 737, thorough. No shortcuts. A jet climbed into the dusk. Lights winking against the stars. She'd always loved that sight, human grit defying gravity, but now it meant more, integrity over greed. Courage over silence. She'd fought for that sky. And won. Months later, she spoke at an aviation safety summit in Atlanta. The room packed with pilots, execs, and regulators. Sometimes you gotta break the system to fix it, she said, voice carrying. Safety's not a bonus, it's the damn foundation. Applause thundered, and she caught Keisha's proud nod from the crowd. She joined Lone Star's safety board eventually, the first Latina in that seat, mentoring kids like Keisha. Pushing for laws shielding whistleblowers. Aviation Weekly ran her face on the cover, the captain who rewrote the rules. She kept it, not for ego, but for the hard days when old biases crept back, reminding her why she'd stood up. A year after Horizon's fall, an email pinged, Ethan Crowley. Captain Rivera, serving probation now. Your fight made me see what I wouldn't. I was wrong. Sorry. She read it twice. Emotions tangled, too late. Yet heavy with meaning. Her dad's voice echoed, people can change. Mija, doesn't erase the past, but it's a start. She replied, apology accepted. Captain Crowley, the sky's big enough for redemption. 5 years on, she captained a red-eye over the Rockies. The cabin dark, passengers trusting her hands. Keisha, now a captain too, flew the next gate over. Horizon was a footnote in textbooks. A cautionary tale. The industry wasn't perfect, bias lingered. Corners still got cut, but it was better. Voices like hers, Diego's, Priya's, Carla's had cracked it open. At DFW's Ops Center. She paused by that plaque again. Her words etched in brass. A newbie pilot, a Latina kid with wide eyes, stopped her. You're Captain Rivera, right? I'm joining 'cause of you. Isabella smiled, handing her a Lone Star Wings pin. Sky's yours too. Kid, fly it true. Outside, a jet roared skyward, piercing the night. She watched, boots planted on Texas dirt, knowing she'd never wait in the lobby again. The horizon stretched wide, no doors. Just possibilities, and she flew toward it. Steady and unbroken.